Mere hours after it was reported that Vice President Harris named Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to be her running mate in the upcoming election, the energy from the Democratic Party has been palpable, from liberals to progressives, and public endorsements have poured in from a surprising range of Democratic politicians, whereas in contrast, MAGA Republicans are currently desperately scrambling to come up with ways to vilify Walz, and we've got to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several things to talk about, but let's get one thing out of the way. It has been confirmed publicly. It's no longer a matter of reporting. It's been publicly confirmed by the vice president that Tim Walz is a running mate. She said on Twitter, "I'm proud to announce that I've asked Tim Walz to be my running mate. As a governor, a coach, a teacher, and a veteran, he's delivered for working families like his. It's great to have him on the team. Now let's get to work." No longer a matter of speculation. I definitely want to get into the unity, the staggering unity and the staggering range of endorsements that he's been getting from prominent Democratic politicians. But before we do, let's have some more fun. Let's have some schadenfreude. Let's look at how desperately MAGA is scrambling to vilify Walz, who has an enormously successful record of helping children and working class families. Let's start with this. MAGA media figures launched desperate and weird attacks on Harris vice presidential pick Tim Walz. This is according to Media Matters. Right-wing media figures responded to Vice President Harris choosing Tim Walz as a running mate by launching desperate, bigoted attacks on him. As governor, and we mentioned this before, but just for context, Walz has pursued a robust pro-worker and pro-child agenda, two public policy areas where conservatives have attempted to make superficial inroads. While some conservative pundits attempted to level attacks on Walz for his progressive record as governor, many of their initial reactions to the news have been strange, bizarre, and some might say weird. Weird, of course, being the phrase that Tim Walz has used so successfully against MAGA Republicans. So, for example, Ben Shapiro, "Meet Tim Walz, who lives in a van down by the river," which is a reference to an infamous Saturday Night Live skit with Chris Farley, who plays a motivational speaker who lives in a van down by the river. So Shapiro started there. Dana Loesch, former NRA spokesperson, has Tim Walz side by side with Boss Hogg, who is one of the villains from Dukes of Hazzard. That guy would be a conservative Republican. Not sure why she's comparing Walz to Boss Hogg. Might actually endear Republican voters to go out and vote for Walz if they think there's an association between these two. Joey Mannarino, who is one of the most unhinged MAGA Republicans. This is a guy who attempted a mass bullying campaign of right-wing figure Kyle Rittenhouse, who said he wasn't going to support Donald Trump in the upcoming election because he felt that Trump was insufficiently supportive of the Second Amendment. Mannarino and other prominent MAGA Republicans bullied Rittenhouse into publicly recanting. Well, this guy says this is Tim Walz's family. Yeah, that is the picture you're looking at. We're looking at the same picture. Others commented on, "Looks normal. What's the problem here?" And he says, "Well, just sharing. I'm just sharing. I'll let others find problems if there are any." Very strange stuff. Robbie Starbuck says Kamala Walz is the DEI presidential ticket. Not sure. I mean, obviously DEI, that's the new N word to a lot of these MAGA Republicans. They've been attempting to use that phrase, weaponize it against the vice president. The polling seems to indicate that it's doing them no favors whatsoever. But Tim Walz, who is a 60-year-old straight cis white guy, not sure how he fits into that based on their own paradigm. I digress. Stephen Miller, a deranged Trump administration alumni who will return to the Trump administration, a second Trump administration if Trump is elected. He says, "Together, Walz and Harris will turn the Midwest into the Middle East rapidly." Very strange stuff. And it keeps going on and on and on. And again, this is just in the past few hours. I mean, we'll eventually do a segment about how Fox, I mean, they are going overtime. They are desperate. They're hunting for things. So I can't imagine by the time Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham get on tonight of what they'll be saying about Tim Walz. Now, that was the MAGA initial response. Very weird, very cringe, very lacking in substance. But let's get to the other good news, which are the public endorsements that have been pouring in from prominent Democrats. AOC, perhaps, the poster person for progressivism, certainly in the United States House of Representatives, if not politicians as a whole, alongside Bernie Sanders. We'll get to him in a second. This is what she had to say. Vice President Harris has made an excellent decision, and Governor Walz is a running mate. Together, they will govern effectively, inclusively, and boldly for the American people. They won't back down under tight odds either, from healthcare to school lunch. Let's do this. More on that later. Senator Bernie Sanders, the other heavyweight of American progressivism, at least with respect to electoral politics. He also gave his endorsement. He says, Tim Walz is a great asset to Kamala Harris's winning campaign and administration. He is a former public school teacher, football coach, and strong union supporter. As governor, he delivered for working families in Minnesota. As vice president, he will deliver for working families of the United States. President Obama, the most popular Democratic politician even now, he says, like Vice President Harris, Governor Tim Walz believes that the government works to serve us, not just some of us, but all of us. That's what makes him an outstanding governor, and that's what will make him an even better vice president. Michelle and I couldn't be happier for Tim and Gwen, their family, and our country. This is the formal statement. When a presidential candidate chooses a running mate, it says a lot about who they are and what kind of person they'll be. Do they pick someone inexperienced and polarizing who will deepen our divisions, like J.D. Vance? Or do they pick someone with the judgment to make tough decisions and the character to believe that every voice counts and everyone deserves an equal chance? By selecting Tim Walz to be her vice president from a pool of outstanding Democrats, Kamala Harris has chosen an ideal partner and made it clear exactly what she stands for. Governor Walz doesn't just have the experience to be vice president, he has the values and integrity to make us proud. As governor, Tim helped families and businesses recover from the pandemic, establish paid family leave, guarantee the right to an abortion, and put common sense gun safety measures in place to keep communities safe. But Tim's signature is his ability to talk like a human being and treat everyone with decency and respect. Not all that surprising considering the fact that he served in the National Guard for 24 years and served as a high school social studies teacher and football coach before being elected to Congress. Like Vice President Harris, Governor Walz believes that government works to serve us, not just some of us, but all of us. And they conclude the way we began. Great endorsement. Here's where it gets really big. You read that right. That right there, that is Joe Manchin, the former Democratic senator of West Virginia, now current incumbent independent senator from West Virginia, who will not seek re-election at the end of this particular term. He's leaving the Senate. And listen, this is a guy who is not only a centrist, but in many ways has been a pain in the ass for President Biden and the Biden-Harris administration. Not in all ways. And I want to be clear, I'd rather have Joe Manchin in West Virginia by far than any Republican. And unfortunately, once he leaves office, his seat will be replaced, presumably by Jim Justice, another West Virginia politician who, like Manchin, used to be governor of West Virginia. So just to be very clear, as much as I criticize Manchin, I'd rather have Manchin in the Senate than a Republican taking his place, because Manchin, more often than not, voted with President Biden and the Biden-Harris administration. It's just that the few times he rebelled, it was on high-profile, very meaningful policy items. So when he chose to be a pain in the ass, it was excruciating. But even he thinks that this is a great decision. My statement on Vice President Harris choosing Governor Tim Walz as a running mate. He says, my friend, Governor Tim Walz, will bring normality back to the most chaotic political environment that most of us have ever seen. All of the candidates were strong, and any one of them could have been a great pick. But I can think of no one better than Governor Walz to help bring our country closer together and bring balance back to the Democratic Party. Governor Walz is the real deal. I look forward to continuing to work with him to bring normalcy back to Washington. Joe Manchin, guys, think about this. Joe Manchin, AOC, Bernie Sanders, Barack Obama, everybody agreeing on Tim Walz. That must mean that Tim Walz is a great pick. As AOC would then go on to say, when people remarked on the range of endorsements from AOC and Bernie Sanders to Joe freaking Manchin, AOC says Dems in disconcerting levels of array. Some other things I want to point out. Somebody shared this meme and I thought it was amazing. So one of Governor Walz's signature policy accomplishments as the governor of Minnesota, which we talked about in previous videos, is that he passed a law which feeds kids at school, every school kid in Minnesota, for free. They get free lunches and breakfasts. And he was celebrated. There's this iconic mimetic photo of children hugging Walz, and Walz just looking so happy that he signed this into law. So Dems, let's give kids free lunches and breakfasts at school. And in contrast, MAGA, let's put kids to work. And it shows a picture of Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the governor of Arkansas, the Republican governor of Arkansas, and a former press secretary for Donald Trump, I might add, signing into law basically a loosening of child labor laws, which allows children to be employed. The contrast is staggering. I said on Twitter, this is the sort of thing that how we need to frame this contrast. Democrats want to feed kids. Republicans want to exploit kids and put them to work. A vast contrast. Piers Morgan, of course, the nonpartisan, political commentator. He says he's a nonpartisan journalist. He responded to this by saying, "This is the most left-wing progressive woke ticket in Democrat history and a gift to Trump." And so I shared a picture of this and said, "Yep, woke is when kids eat." Because that's just how they think. Oh, you want to feed children? You want to feed children with your communist free lunches and free breakfasts? How woke of you. Really stupid stuff. Another tweet of Piers Morgan. Kamala Harris may have just lost the election with this VP pick. It has a Sarah Palin feel to it, albeit for different reasons. And I said, imagine being this ready to write off Harris Walz while bending over backwards to pretend that Trump Pence aren't historically unpopular. Trump just uncracked 40% approval rating. He just cracked it. He just got up to 40% approval rating after being shot in the head. After riding the wave of an assassination attempt sympathy, he could only squeak 40%. With all the political momentum behind him, with everything being a referendum on President Biden, Donald Trump is so disliked, he could only crack 40%. Donald Trump is historically unpopular. Even as president, on his best day, he never got even 50% approval. He was an unpopular president. He was and is and shall always be an unpopular candidate, which is why he's never won the popular vote against any Democratic challenger, including Hillary Clinton. And then I say, and J.D. Vance's numbers are mimetically abysmal, which they are. I mean, he is staggeringly unpopular and also the subject of memes. Now, listen, this election is still going to be pretty close. It's entirely possible that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance win. I take nothing for granted. I've said this time and time again. As a matter of fact, some people in my comments get mad at me when I point that out. I refuse to be overconfident about this. But I tell you what, I am more confident than I was, and I think we stand a damn good chance of winning, but we have to keep the fire burning. We have to keep the energy high. We have to keep the momentum high. We take nothing for granted. We use every opportunity at our disposal to get the word out, to make the contrast, to encourage people to vote, and then and only then will we win. But there are 3 months between now and the election. So I think this is a solid step in the right direction. And it'll be interesting to see how MAGA Republicans try to vilify Governor Walz in the near future. And I'm sure we'll be doing more videos about that once we have more information. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.